Hello and welcome to Strides Forward, where we share stories about running told by women. I am Cherie Louise Turner, your host and producer, and before we get into this story, I want to let you know that this episode is sponsored by The Feed, the #1 online resource for supplements and nutritional needs for athletes like you. The Feed was created by athletes for athletes, so you can rest assured that all the products that you find there have been tested and curated and approved by the athletes at The Feed. Their interest is your performance as well as their own. And there's a huge variety to choose from. There are over 200 brands represented at The Feed. So this is your one-stop shop for nutrition and supplementation for your athletic performance needs. If you're looking for gels, hydration, mixes, bars, all of it, you can find it at The Feed. So shop thefeed.com. And as a part of this sponsorship, you can claim $80 in Feed credit today. Just go to thefeed.com/forward. Yes, that's a / and the word forward, FORWARD, to claim your $80 in Feed credit today. And enjoy shopping at The Feed. Now, on to the episode.
It was actually one of my teammates. We were casually sitting around one day and she said, oh yeah, I mean, eventually every woman on this team is going to run under 3 hours. And I said, I was looking at her, I was like, she's not talking about me. There's no way. I just run a 3:30. Like the idea of running under 3 hours in a marathon. I'm like, wait, what pace is that? Absolutely not. Like, no way. But she said that. And so the whole Sub-3 thing really from that moment was in the back of my mind, but I certainly did not feel like it was that I could do that. Like that just seemed impossible.
Strides forward.
My name is Erica Stanley-Dottin. I am from Brooklyn, New York. I am a mom of 2 boys, 8 and 11, and I'm also the community manager and events director for Tracksmith here in New York City. And I am 48 years old.
Erica, of course, is also a runner. Specifically, she's a competitive marathon runner these days with big goals. And she's going to tell you the whole story here because you are listening to Strides Forward, the podcast that features stories about running told by women. Thank you so much for being here. I am Cherie Louise Turner, your host and producer, and you are in for a treat. Plus a little bonus. After the credits, please stick around to hear an anecdote from Erica about her running world fates colliding in really wonderful ways. But of course, before that, we're going to get into the episode, and you're going to hear all about how Erica went from thinking that she absolutely could never break 3 hours in the marathon to knowing that she absolutely can. Along the way, you're also going to hear Erica mention BQ, which is shorthand for Boston Qualifier, and it is the marathon time you have to run to qualify for the Boston Marathon. Those times are adjusted for age and gender. Getting a BQ is an achievement all its own. It's a point of pride and respect in the world of marathon running. And when Erica was first aiming to get her BQ, she needed to run 3 hours, 45 minutes. So this puts Erica's pursuit of a sub-3-hour marathon into stark perspective. 45 minutes less than a very respectable marathon time. To put this in super basic terms, running a sub-3 is incredibly hard. For women and men alike, it is a really significant goal. And as you'll hear, for Erica and for many of her teammates, this goal is meaningful for multiple reasons. And while the story is about meeting a really challenging time goal, it is also about the people that Erica is on this journey with. Key among them are her teammates and coach. Erica is a member of the competitive running team, the Black Roses, which is headed up by writer, poet, passionate runner, and coach, Knox Robinson. But that's not where we're going to start. We're going to go back to before Erica had even considered running a marathon at all.
Well, I always loved to run, but I was always running. Like when I say running, on the treadmill or doing, 3, 4, 5 miles here and there, like just to stay in shape, just to be active, all through my late 20s and early 30s. But the idea of distance running never really occurred to me as a sport, something to be competitive in. And then, probably around my mid 30s, I started running with a group of friends that I had, and one particular was training for the New York City Marathon. And so I was in Central Park, and we would do runs and we would hang out, and then I cheered him on in that race. It was 2007 New York City Marathon. And I watch the marathon every year because it rolls through my neighborhood in Brooklyn, and so it's been a part of my life since I was a kid. But like there was something about that year that I was cheering for him. And after having run with him and our other friends and seeing, all the work he had put in, and like then he was out there doing it. And there was something about that was just like, oh, a light bulb went off. It was just like, I could do that. Like I want to try that, like this is like a new challenge. And I think I had to see sort of his process and him going through it to kind of appreciate, because cheering the marathon is like my favorite thing ever. I mean, it's such an amazing thing to watch, all those folks out there. But I think when you are close to somebody who trained for one, it's like you're watching a different thing. You're seeing inspiration on another level. And so after that, I just decided I was going to register and I was going to try to run a marathon. And it was just like that. And so I was, thinking about, well, I could do that. Like all I got to do is, get a plan and like, start running longer and all that kind of stuff. And so that's what I did. I just downloaded like a little plan off the internet, printed it out, put it on my fridge. And I think it was like Hal Higdon's like, beginning marathon plan or something like that. Right. And it was like, I did some research. I was like, oh, this looks interesting. I looked at the mileage. I was like, oh, I could do that. It was like 4 miles, 4 miles, 4 miles, and then like go up to 10 miles, and so it was really simple. And I started jogging around and doing my own thing. And it was cool because I was just like, oh, I can do this. So yeah, I think that part of it was just like fun to me because it was something new that I was kind of, and now what I know about the marathon journey is like, it was a very solo effort back then because, it was something that I was embarking on, but I had no idea what I was doing. I wasn't even at the level to be like, oh, I need people to run with, or I need a coach, or I was just like, okay, let me just follow this plan and see what happens, type of thing. But, I obviously wanted to run a certain time. I wanted to run 4 hours, I wanted to break 4 hours in my first marathon. And that was only because I had heard other people talking about that. I didn't even know what that really meant. So I was just like, oh, I'm going to break 4 hours in my first marathon. But yeah, I think all of those things just made it was fun, and so download the plan and I just started training on my own. I'm at the group that I was running with before, like I would run with them every once in a while, but they had all kind of, dissipated by then, after the marathon. And so this is 2008 now. So I was doing most of my running on my own. And then my run started getting longer and it was cool because I was just like, oh, I can do this. The plan had me going up to like 20 miles. So I did 20 miles. The first time I ran 20 miles, I remember it because like I just felt like such a sense of accomplishment with that run. And then, yeah, that kind of just fueled me to keep going. One thing that sticks out is that this training, all these runs, all of this mileage and practice and was preparing you for a race that was longer. Like back then I wasn't thinking about it like I might think about it now, which is that, really it's about the training. The race day is like, the celebration, or this is, the race day is like you showing what you've done, but like the training is it, right? But like I think then it was like, oh, all this training is preparing me for a race that's even longer. Like, what is that? What is that like? Like, cause like, well, what is running 26 miles even? So I mean, I remember being really nervous about that, but also like excited.
Erica would discover for the very first time just what running 26.2 miles was all about on November 2nd, 2008. That was the day she lined up in Staten Island and followed the course of the New York City Marathon all the way to its finish in Central Park.
It was awesome. I mean, it was a whole big thing. I mean, all my friends and my family and, they had watched me train for this. And like, so, and like I said, it rolls through my neighborhood. So like everybody they had the t-shirts made up and it was like signs and like, it was New York, obviously. And so my sister rode the ferry with me over to the Staten Island. Like it was a whole big thing. But I remember like I was enjoying the experience for sure. And then like, when I started getting tired, probably, around mile 20, in the 20s, that last 10K obviously is like still where you get tired now, right? It's like, I was like, oh, okay, this is hard. Like, this is like, okay, like, and so now I'm in Harlem. I saw the rest of my family and everything. And then I got to Fifth Avenue and I was just like, oh, this sucks. Like, what is happening? Like, and then, and then like mile 25, 24, 25. I was like, okay, just finished. But I did. And I ran a 4:06. I did not break 4 hours, but I ran a 4:06. And I was pleased with that because I was like, okay, and then after that, obviously I was hooked. So I finished the marathon. That was 2008. It's a huge sense of accomplishment. I did it immediately. Like when I say I got hooked, I mean, I think I was hooked, but like I didn't immediately say, oh, I'm going to sign up for my next one, which people do sometimes, right? It was still my first one. So I was like, okay, that's cool, and then I started running half marathons, so I would sign up for New York Road Runners races, here and there. And then I think between, life, work and everything else, I didn't necessarily jump right back into the race in the marathon, but I think that did spark the running, like the distance running thing. So like, like I said, I would run halves, I would run 10Ks, just get in races and stuff. And then I met my husband the following year in 2009. He was also a runner. And he had run, one of the things we had in common, he had run like the 2006, 2007 marathons and I ran 2008. And so we met and married really quickly. And then, I had my first son probably a year after that. And so like life things kind of took over. And so, after that marathon, essentially, 2 years, a year and a half later, I was pregnant with my first son. So, that my running changed just naturally because of all that. And so, yeah, so then after I had my first son, probably the next year, I got back into halves and started running again just to get, to stay active and everything. And I was still running, when he was a baby, just to get back in shape, after that. So like then running became sort of that was my thing, my go-to, it still is. But like at that point in my life, it was more about like fitness and like dropping the baby weight and all that kind of stuff. But I didn't get back into like racing until, way after that.
Racing. While Erica had yet to develop the skills of being a competitive distance runner, she did have years of experience developing as a competitive athlete.
I do have a track background. So I've been running and racing, since I was a kid. I started out in middle school and went on to compete in high school after I found my coach and my mentor, Fred Thompson, who started the Adams Track Club here in Brooklyn and also the Colgate Women's Games, which is the longest running track series for women in the country. It's been going on for 47 years. And so Freddie, my mom, me being a, 12, 13-year-old who needed some guidance and direction, my mom, and I love to run. I was like the gym class runner and all that, but my mom decided to take me around to Pratt, where he was coaching, which is right near my house in Brooklyn. And, I met him. And, after that, it was like, that kind of took my running and to the next level. And I was a teenager. And so it kind of gave a lot of direction to my life and, really set me up for so many things. I'm still to this day thinking about how that moment and, meeting him and starting to race and do track as a teenager had really shaped me and changed everything. Because I think I'm naturally a competitor, right? I'm definitely a lifelong athlete. And so, I've always had that in me. And so I think and I think that's probably still true today, once I started training and like I actually saw myself improving and getting better and like, competing at a higher level from the year before, once that started happening, I think it changed the way I was looking at it. In the beginning, obviously, like most teenagers, my interest was waning. It was in and out. Like I didn't know, if I was going to do this, it was like a time commitment, but then once I started really, getting better and I was like, this is kind of cool. It's kind of fun, and like, I want to explore this, and so I think that my curiosity about, what can I actually do, is the thing that kind of kept me, in it and going. And, my group of sprinter teammates, we were really close and like, because we would have to be, we would be running the same, we'd be training together, racing together, or relays together. That kind of camaraderie and bonding is different, it's a different type of friendship. And I think I reflect on that more now, I guess, but like when you're in it, you're in it. But like, I think just being in that, and having that sisterhood was really cool. I went on to compete in college. I went to Georgetown, and I was a sprinter actually. So I was a quarter miler, and for me, competing at the collegiate level, obviously, was a lot. I ended up, doing well, but by the time I graduated, track and just running and everything was just so I was exhausted. So I just, and like most early 20 somethings, wanted to just do my own thing and figure out what was next. And so then I just kind of started doing some jogging around, but it was nothing serious until I got into my 30s.
Erica's jogging around had led her to that 2008 New York City Marathon, but it would be a number of years before she got back to running that distance.
So 2011, my son was born, and then I ran the Brooklyn half probably the next year. And, I would just do little halves and road races. Oh, and then we had our second son in 2013, so 2.5 years apart. So like that was the other thing. So I had two kids pretty much, very close, close-ish together. And so, I was still running. So then my husband signed up for the 2014 New York City Marathon. And so, and then he went on to run 14, 15, and 16. And so we were out there cheering him. And I think that's what, I was like, okay, I want to get back into this. I'm ready. And so I ended up signing up for the 2017 New York City Marathon. So that was 9 years after my first one. And then I ran my second one. By 2017, like we had a little parent group and a couple of us were runners. And so we were talking more about, just running in general. And I had people to run with. And, and in fact, a friend of ours, parent friend, ran 2017 with me, and we ran together, I should say. And yeah, it was a totally different experience doing that as a parent 9 years later with someone than doing it by myself and not knowing what I was doing. So yeah, things changed. I ended up running a 3:56, so I did break 4 hours. I was very happy with myself. Like, that was my first experience with super shoes. I went and bought my little Nike 4%. Like I had the outfit, everything. It was like a totally different marathoner going into that one than it was, 9 years prior. And then, people, and again, for people talking and just being around others and like the sport and more and out there and learning about what was in the community, people started saying things like BQ and, talking about, other races. And I'm like, well, what is that? And, so those are kinds of things that started happening just naturally as I got back into it. So I think I got my sights, set on going back to like, my competitive self, like the same person I've always been, right? It was like, once I heard about this BQ stuff, I was like, oh, with Boston's BQ, Boston, oh, okay, so you have to run a certain time to run that race. So then, my competitor kicked in and I was like, well, I want to do that. I want to try that, and now I'm in my 40s. So like I wasn't aware even of age groups and all that kind of stuff. And so, I looked at the time to qualify for Boston in my age group. And it was like 3:45 at the time. And so I was like, oh, I think I could do that. Like I ran 3:56 in New York. Like, maybe if I run a flat race, I can run 3:45. And so what did I do? I went and signed up for the New Jersey Marathon because I heard it was flat and I could do that. And like, and so again, on my own, I downloaded a plan this time. I was like, let me put in some track, workouts and do it, but solely, mainly by myself. I would go on my group runs every once in a while and just like kind of still a solo journey, if you will. And then that following April of 2018, I ran the New Jersey Marathon and I did it. I got the BQ on my own. And then I was like, okay, I need a coach. I need a group. I need a coach. Because then that's what I think put the fire in me to be like, all right, well, if I'm going to do that, I need to step it up another notch, a couple of notches. So that's, I think, why I ended up kind of exploring other ways of training.
That exploration led Erica directly to checking out a running team she'd been following for a while, one that emphasized dedicated group training and elevating women's running.
Black Roses was, it was kind of like I was like, oh, this is a cool thing, and I loved, the diversity in the group, some of the people on the team, I was watching them and they were so fast and a lot of women and just like doing really cool things in the community. And Knox, who ended up being my coach later on, Knox Robinson, I loved the things that he talked about. He's a writer. So like he would write about, the training that they were doing. It was just all really interesting to me and totally, piqued my interest. And so I ended up showing up to the open sessions, which is essentially like, it's not a tryout, but I guess it is. It's kind of like open session, come to see if, this is something you'd like to do. And it's always some like crazy workout. And like, so I showed up that summer. I showed up to open sessions, and I guess the rest was history. I met everyone and like did the workouts, and I came every week. And then at the end of it, he was just like, oh, I want you to run with us, like, and I was like, oh, cool. Like, and like, I mean, obviously I was so happy and so excited, but I didn't even go into it as if it was a tryout, but, in my mind it was, right. And it was like, I felt, accepted. And I also was excited about like having a group to train with now and a coach. And like, what does that mean? Like, so that kind of changed everything. The other part of it was like, I lost my dad in June of 2018, and he was, super active, always suddenly a heart attack. And so, the day he was going to go play tennis, like something crazy. But like, I think that deep down, when I think about it now, like that was something that changed the way I was looking at this. I was just like, okay. And like, and he was also very close to my marathon journey. He'd always be cheering me on, and like, because he was still very active himself. And so I think when that happened, there was something in me that was just like, okay, like, what am I waiting for? Like, what are you afraid of? Like, yeah, sure, you can be intimidated and all that, but you still, want to level up, like, just go do it, and I think that's what kind of gave me that kind of blind courage to just show up to this group and being, like a mom of two in her 40s and be like, hey, I want to run with you guys, So I think that was it. And then I guess I think back to, drawing back to when I was a kid, I have to say, like, I like to race. I get nervous, but my nervousness is always like the anxious butterflies. I love competing. I love running. I love all of that stuff about the sport. And so like, showing up to this workout with these people I don't know was excitement, something new, all those things that, I love also. So like, it was kind of tapping into that. Then that brought out another part of me, right? It was almost like I was going back to the old me, and I think joining that group really changed me in so many ways, because I was at that point, I had been a mom for almost 8 years at that point, and almost 10 years. And so like, I was mom, I was mom of 2 boys at home. It was until then I was running. But being in this group, they didn't know me as that. They knew me as this woman, as Erica, who shows up and like is running with them, right? And so I was anonymous. They didn't know anything about me. They didn't know anything about my life. They didn't know anything about my dad. They didn't know anything. It was just me, right? And I think there was a comfort there, just having been through all that and still going through my day-to-day. There was a comfort in being anonymous in that way. And so I was able to just kind of tap into who I was, and that's the competitor. That's the person who loved to run and who wants to explore and, get better in this. That was moving me into the next phase of my life as well. And like, unbeknownst to me at the time, like that brought so many other things into my life in every way that, yeah, like, and I guess it was at the time I was thinking about running, but like now running has literally changed my life in so many ways.
Greetings from Evergreen Podcasts. We're rolling out a listener survey, and we want to hear from you. The information in the survey will help us gather statistics and in turn make our shows more appealing to advertisers. I know most people don't like ads, but this is one of the only ways our shows make money and help keep their lights on. We promise it will only take a few minutes, but the impact on our podcasts will be tremendous. As a token of our appreciation, we'll randomly select one lucky participant each month to win an exclusive merchandise package from Evergreen Podcasts. Head to evergreenpodcast.com/listenersurvey to help a show and possibly get some free stuff for doing so. We can't thank you enough for the support. Now back to the show.
Well, first, to have a sisterhood, like I was talking about earlier with my track team, and to have that was always so special to me. But like, to have that at this point in my life, I would have never expected it, and I would have never thought it would happen. But to have that sisterhood in a sport like this, where I am, is everything. And then, in terms of the women, like my coach, Knox and Black Roses has always been about, uplifting women. Like when we're training, like we all start together, the guys, if they break off and do their own thing, that's cool. But he doesn't split us up into groups, the men here, the women here. We're all one team and we all start together and we work together. And so, but he's also very, very clear that like it's about us, uplifting us. And so even the guys on the team, like they're always so supportive of us and what we're trying to do and races and it's really cool. Funny enough, it's like now when I'm looking back now, that was for 2018 when I joined. So I've been around. I've been around them for 4 years, and so I think the breaking three thing. I mean, even taking a step back to that, like before even getting there, like in terms of how it changed my whole situation. Like they're practicing in the evenings and they're practicing on the weekends, and like it forced me to figure out help with the boys so that I could do something for me, and all those kinds of things that as a mother, like we don't do because we're just in it, and I had little kids, and so first being part of the group forced me to do that, which then brought out the other part where I could actually focus on the training. And so it wasn't until when I ran my first marathon under Black Roses, it was New York City again. I joined the group over the summer, trained hard, all just kind of like jumped right in, and then I ran New York that fall of 2018 in 3:30. And then I was like, it's like a big jump. And I was like, wow. And so that was, I think, a moment when, for me personally, it was like, okay, like again, sparking that interest in that, in how far can I go with this? Like, what else can I do? And so 3:30, and then going into 3:30, that was 2018. And so, I mean, I continued on, all through 2019, trained and everything. And then I ran a 3:15 in Philly the next year. And I said, okay, that's another 15 minutes. Maybe I could get close to 3 hours. I don't know, and that was the moment where I was like, actually saw that maybe it was possible. And then COVID. So that was the following spring. But I had it in my mind then, because that was the first time after Philly where I felt like I was racing a marathon. Like I ran that race and I was like, oh, I wasn't just running a marathon. I felt like I was racing a marathon for the first time. I remember feeling in that race, even when I was running in New York, like that 3:30 in New York, I went out pretty slow. Like I was scared, I was still kind of like, oh, I can't go out running too fast. Like I was still trying to be like, oh, like conserve my energy. But in Philly that year, I don't know, I just went for it. And I remember in the race feeling like, oh, I'm running fast. Like I can do this. Like this is cool. Like, it was like, I remember thinking that to myself, like I'm going to do this. I'm going to run a good time. Like and I wasn't even going for a time goal at all. I just wanted to run better than I did. But when I started looking down at my watch and I was running, consistent miles in the low sevens, I was like, oh, like I surprised myself. And that was the first time I had felt that, I felt like during the race when I was actually running, like I was going to I could do pretty good. And so I felt like I was racing.
Erica was starting to see that going after a sub-3-hour marathon was becoming a very realistic goal. And for her and some of her closest teammates who were chasing a sub-3 as well, reaching that goal would also put them on the list, capital T, capital L. And that list is all of the American-born Black women who have run under 3 hours. Currently, there are only 24 women on the list. To put this in some perspective, at the 2022 Boston Marathon alone, there were 181 American women who ran under 3 hours. This reality speaks volumes about distance running culture in the United States, as well as social, historical, and cultural influences that go far beyond running.
I think definitely getting on the list is meaningful, just being an American-born Black woman to be on this list. I think that just in terms of our culture, in terms of our running culture, we spend a lot of time talking about the sport of running and, its accessibility and representation and everything. And, it's always been important to me to represent, but also represent all of us, right? We're not a monolith. It's not just about, I think that And we talk about this a lot on my team. And so like, this is something that for us as the Black folks on the team became a thing because it was also the group, the effort, the knowing that we were all trying to go after this thing together with Knox, coaching us like that. All of these things kind of became the thing. The list is the list, but like really it's been the journey of trying to do this with these women and him. And that's been really special. And then I think just in terms of the list itself, obviously being on it, for me as a Black American woman is important, but also I think it's just about, performance. And like, I think it's just as important that people see us performing as it is just us running out there. A lot of times that, representation for folks really means that, oh yeah, we're out here, there's brown people and Black and brown people who run. Yeah, sure. Cool. But there's also some Black and brown people out here who are like really trying to do it and trying to do big things and try to, break barriers and like, and in a sport that like, I'm an example, like I started out as a sprinter, like many of us do, that's just because when we start running track, we want to run fast, we're not thinking about distance, and so it's like, for us to all, and a lot of the women on the list, too, not everyone came from distance backgrounds, but we're all so different. And even the women on my team, I'm obviously the oldest, I have kids, I have a whole different life, than they do. And each of us have different lives. And so it's really like all that story, which I have become so attached to in terms of like telling, but also just the journey with them, which has become like such a personal and such an amazing experience for me.
Through this journey, Erica has begun to see her teammates, one by one, start to add their names to the list. And along the way, she's been edging ever closer herself.
In the fall of 2021, I, myself, Sharada Maddox, and Danny McNeely, three of us ran London. And Sharada Maddox ran Sub-3 in London. And then Giovanna Fisher, she ran a 2:56 this year in Boston, her third marathon ever. And she had just joined Black Roses in 2021. So that was the first time that any of us had done it. London 21 and then Boston 22. It was, and I ran both of those races and I was supposed, and I, in my mind, like, something happened both times, in London, my hamstring pulled. And so, I was kind of like hobbling toward the end of the race, and then in Boston this year, I got dehydrated. I ran a 3:01. I was still PRing and like by a lot in these races, but like, something happened in both races that taught me that, oh, okay. So the marathon actually doesn't owe you a thing at all. Like you can train and be in the best shape of your life. I had run a 1:22 half in New York in March. And so I was ready. And, I was on target with my training as well. I was running 80-mile weeks. I was knocking out workouts. I ran the 1:22 a month before. Like I was on a roll. And, my coach thought I was somewhere in around 250 shape. And so that was where I was thinking I was going to end up being. And the sun was out that day. I almost kind of blacked out. I got dizzy on the course. I had to stop a couple times to walk. And like, so yeah, like that was a big, big learning for me. Boston, this past Boston, I was on target. I was in like up until, I got dehydrated. I kind of slowed down, but like, and that wasn't really until the last, I would say 4 or 5 miles, honestly. Like it was at the end of the race again. So that was like super frustrating. But, I ran a 3:01 and that was my fastest race ever. And so now, I feel like Sub-3, I feel like I already had a Sub-3. I kind of now, okay, how fast can I run? And how many more of these do I actually have in me? You know what I mean? At this point, I'm like, how fast can I actually run now? Like I'm kind of focused on that and just like really pushing it to see, and because now I know that even on race day, so many things can happen, but that's a part of it, right? That's the excitement of it, which I've always liked. All I can do is get back out there and like do it again. There was nothing, obviously I made some mistakes. I don't think obviously in terms of my fueling and like, I could have done some other things differently, but like, yeah, just lots of learning. So I had it.
She did have it. Erica was so tantalizingly close, and the Sub-3 is so clearly within her reach. But let's step back for a minute just to not overlook the fact that a 3:01 in the marathon was yet one more PR, and Boston is a tough course. It is not a place to run the fastest you're capable of, even when you are having a great day. And running 3:01 in any circumstances is incredible. And yet, Erica knows she's got more in her, and she wants to find out just how much. So she'll be putting her experience and speed and competitive spirit to the test again very soon.
So it's, Berlin in the fall, so in September. Yeah. So we'll see. We're going to take another crack at it. I still feel like I haven't had the race yet. You know what I mean? Like I've had great races. Like I've been PRing, I've been having, I had the half, I think maybe in New York, but I haven't had the marathon where that race, where I'm going to run fast, nothing happens, I'm good. You know what I mean? But that's the excitement of it. It's like, am I going to have it? We'll see. All I can do is train, and get ready for it. So yeah, that's exciting.
That is totally exciting, and I will be eagerly following along using the Berlin Marathon Tracker app, and I'll be cheering Erica on from afar. I hope you join me. That'll be on September 25th, 2022. You can also follow Erica on Instagram. She is at Stanley.Dot with 2 T's, and I'll link that in the show notes. I want to wish Erica the very, very best for Berlin and whatever else comes next in her journey. And I want to thank Erica so much for sharing her story on the podcast. Her showing up to go after seriously fast marathons and half marathons. 1:22 and a half, that is some serious speed. It is all so inspiring and on so many levels as a dedicated competitor and runner, as a mom, as a 48-year-old, as a woman, as an American-born Black woman, as a community builder, as a teammate. Erica is showing up in so many ways. And in addition to that, as a social impact producer for the running documentary Sisters on Track, which we're going to get to in just a minute. But before that, I do want to encourage you to check out the notes for this episode. In addition to having Erica's Instagram link there, I'm also going to post links to get more information about the Sisters on Track documentary, which you can, and I highly recommend you do, watch on Netflix. It's fantastic. I will also link to the calendar of Tracksmith events and group runs. As Erica mentioned way up at the beginning, she's the community manager for Tracksmith New York City, and she oversees all the events that go into building community there, their group runs and other events. And you can see all of that on the calendar, or you can sign up for the Tracksmith New York City newsletter, and you can follow them on Strava to stay up to date on everything that's going on there. As always, I want to thank you so much for being here and for listening. We love making this podcast, but we couldn't do it without you. And we would love it if you would share the show with your friends or via social media. Word of mouth is how independent shows like ours grow, and you sharing the show makes a huge impact. Thank you. Also, please tag us. We are at Strides Forward on Twitter and on Instagram, and you can find us on Facebook too. And of course, I do not make this show by myself. Cormac O'Regan makes all the original music for the show, and he does the sound design. That all happens in his studio in Cork, Ireland. April Mariner of Bonfire Collaborative does all the design work for Strides Forward, including the website, the merch, the social media, all of it. April comes to you from Truckee, California, and you can find her at bonfirecollaborative.com. And yes, I am Cherie Louise Turner. I am the host and producer of Strides Forward. And as always, I am coming to you from a closet in Somerville, Massachusetts. Thank you again for listening. I will now wish you many happy, joyful strides forward, and I will leave you with this final anecdote from Erica. It's all about worlds colliding in delightfully fortunate ways and how running is about so much more than the simple act of putting one foot in front of the other. Here's Erica to take you out.
Yeah, and it's one of those stories where, again, how running and specifically joining Black Roses changed my life because, I met the director of Sisters on Track completely, it was the most serendipitous thing, maybe one of the top 5 things that happened in my life. I was outside the school one day dropping off my kids. Our kids go to the same school. And I was sitting out there, and it was the one day I usually drive. That day I didn't drive. I took an Uber with my son, and then I was waiting with a parent who I knew was coming back to my neighborhood. I was like, I was going to catch a ride back with him. And so he's like, oh, come with me real quick. I just got to buy something for lunch from the store, and then we'll go home. I'm like, cool. And he was talking to another guy named Charles. And so the 3 of us went walking, and Charles and I, we started chit-chatting outside this deli while our other friend was in. And it was my friend Ennis, the one who I'd run with, in 2017. So they were all parents at the same school. And so Charles and I just started chit-chatting. He's like, oh, so what do you do? I was like, oh, I'm an event producer by trade, but like I started getting into some film production, shoots and stuff in the last couple of years. And he's like, oh, my wife's a director. I'm like, cool. And I had met them before, at the school, but I didn't know anything about, what they did or anything like that. He's like, yeah, she just finished a film actually, and that's going to be on Netflix. I'm like, oh, that's cool. And I was like, well, what is it about? And he's like, it's called Sisters on Track. It's about these 3 girls from Brooklyn who run track for the Jeunesse Track Club. And I was like, wait, what? And the Jeunesse Track Club was started by Jean Bell, who also was coached by Freddie Thompson and she was an Atom. I've known Jean since I was a kid, right? And Freddie started Colgate. And so he started going on about this film, and I was like, it was literally these girls, this film and this story was every part of my life it was unreal. And I was just sitting here, I pulled up my phone, I was like, Freddie was my mentor. And he was like, what? And so we just started going back and forth. And then he told me, he was like, she's looking for social impact producers to work on this film. And, and then I didn't even know what social impact work was for films. I learned a lot about it, but basically, they got this funding from Colgate to do a social impact campaign, which basically most documentaries have them, but it's using the subject and themes in the film to do some social programming and impact work. And so, all the close connections. So finally, he was like, okay, I'm going to send her your number so you guys can talk. She called me right. He told her, within, I say an hour, she had already called me. She's like, oh my God. She was like, I had to meet with you. We met that day. And when I tell you, they had been shooting that film for 5 years. So like that meant that they were shooting the whole time we were at the school. No idea. And at that point, I wasn't in the sport as much as I, was in the past. Obviously, I was kind of disconnected from it, and our coach, Freddie, died in 2019. And so like I had seen, I hadn't really seen everybody since then. And, I was kind of disconnected, but like, yeah, like they were filming this thing the whole time and I had no idea. And so we started talking about it. And then she said she had a meeting with a guy named John Cohen, who was from Fader magazine. And he told her, in outreach for this project, you need to find Black Roses and Knox Robinson and talk to them about da-da-da-da-da-da and XYZ. She told me the piece of paper, that the email he sent her. You need to find these people. So I was like, I run with Black Roses. Knox is my coach. He was like, what? It was like that. It was crazy, like every level of overlap. And so anyways, I ended up coming on to be one of the social impact producers for the last year for the film. And it was amazing. Like it brought me back into the sport. It brought me back into, my past in terms of like, the track world, like, and up until now, even with this Tracksmith, it brought me Tracksmith. There's so many things that have come out of that has brought me back into the track world, which I'm so appreciative of because I had been out of it for so long. So yeah, it was wild. And then obviously working with the girls and Jeunesse and like, being back in that was so nostalgic, but also really cool just to support Jean and, what she's doing. And she's been doing it for 35 years, and it's just like a reminder of all these things that are happening all the time that we, are in and out of, but like they're happening. They're still happening,
Whoops, that strides forward.
Hear Her Sports is a podcast for everyone who loves stories by and about women striving to improve and make a difference in their lives. I am your host, Elizabeth Emery, a former professional cyclist. In every episode, I introduce a female athlete or woman in the business of sport through a thoughtful conversation about who they are and the terrific work they're doing. My guests and I explore the glorious and frustrating issues in sports, history, equity, training, nutrition, and so much more. Join us for inspiration, for community, and for love of being a strong, athletic woman.